Can we verify? Do we have somebody standing by?
Oh, I think this is it. This is it.
Keep refreshing.
We're doing it.
We're live.
Yes.
Oh,
welcome.
There we are.
Oh,
we are live. All right, we're doing this. You guys didn't see this, but we spent the last 25 minutes struggling to figure this out. We are actually live. Game Audio Hour is back. Game Audio Hour is, of course, a fortnightly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. Let's go around to Chase. How are you doing, Chase?
Doing pretty good. We got a round 2 going on right now, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, just like your shirt, we're just going to keep on doing it. We're going to keep on grinding and keep on moving to Mike. Hello, Mike.
How are you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. It's good to see you again. And
I guess you were asking me that question, so I should have answered for myself. But things are pretty good over here. Struck that ideal kind of work-life balance at the moment, and waiting for something to come along to knock it out of sync. But at the moment, everything is pretty copacetic.
This is what's going to knock it out of sync. This attempt to record.
That's right. Yeah, and you are a big part of that. You are going to help us knock it out right now. Cody Matthew Johnson, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you. You know, I feel like this is like deja vu. I feel like I've done this with you guys a couple of times now. I feel like we're family, and this is just it's a pleasure to be here for the third time today, and I'm looking forward to talking about some fun stuff. This is cool.
Cody is not just a pretty face. He is a wonderful, wonderful music composer, musician, sound designer, and he's done some really cool stuff that you might have listened to if you've been playing some Capcom games in the last few years. So things like Resident Evil 2, as well as Devil May Cry 5, and actually Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which if you're a fighting game player, like me, Chase, I know you're a fighting game guy as well. And like, oh yeah, that was cool. You contributed some tracks to that game as well. So we're really glad to have you on the show here.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you very much. You know, you said wonderful music. I don't know if my music is wonderful. It definitely, I try to evoke emotions, but like wonderful, I feel like that's like the opposite of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Well, honestly, I think it hits really well. So for example, like Resident Evil 5, I think, sorry, did I say Resident Evil? I've been conflating things here. Resident Evil 5, Devil May Cry 2. Resident Evil 2, like I think that ending song is really great and it hits really well. We talked a little bit about this in the green room and actually in our previous recording session, our failed recording session, but making this song for this moment in a game that gamers know it's been around for 20 years, and here it is getting remade, not just remade, but really reimagined as a game. Everything that's going on there, the mechanics, and even how the story is delivered. And part of that also is this reimagining of the music. And, could you tell us a little bit about that process there?
Yeah, absolutely. So like going back to we're going to jump in a time machine and we're going to go to 1998, where I think Bill Clinton was president, and, things were not as crazy, and Britney Spears has not shaved her head, and, things. But so Resident Evil 2 kind of, as a whole, was this very like genre-defying game. I think it really set the stage for horror games, and not just horror games, but kind of like video game horror music. And for some reason, this game really struck a chord with kind of video game fans everywhere, and Resident Evil fans, and just it really took off, where people fell in love with the score. But specifically, the way this game is structured, as I'm sure you know, Vince, and anyone who's played Resident Evil 2 from 2019 or 1998 knows that there's two sides to the story, right? There, you play as Claire or Leon, you play all the way through, you start over as the other player, and you see it from a different perspective, and some different things can happen. So you kind of, it's a cool and innovative way to see a story from a couple different angles. And I think now people have kind of taken that concept and run with it. And, you have like Christopher Nolan movies. But when you get to the end of the game, after you play twice, there was this song. And as we were saying earlier, it's like this, it could not be more different than the score. It's like this antithesis, like antithetical song that is like slapping bass with guitar. And for some reason, people just loved it. They just like lost their minds over it. And so coming forward to 2019, they're making a game with their modern RE engine, and they're taking an approach to it to appeal to kind of a new audience. Someone who's never played Resident Evil could play this game and really vibe with it and have a lot of fun. I've seen a lot of people do that, but they also wanted to cater the game to the people who played the 1998 Resident Evil 2, and now they've had like potentially a lifetime, a generation. They might have kids, or they've done something amazing with their lives, and so much has changed. But they have this moment of nostalgia where they can look back and kind of think about the trajectory of their lives, and that sort of emotion and this pain of remembering. It's not really pain of like your life is bad or you didn't do what you wanted to do, but you had different drives and things turned out differently. And that's kind of what they wanted to hit home with the game, and then ultimately the song at the end. So like no slapping basses, no, and people were pissed, but if you don't at least piss a couple people off, then you're doing the wrong thing. But no slapping basses, but we wrote this song that was kind of it was harkening back to grunge in 1998. We were talking about some Chris Cornell and some Kurt Cobain, while still keeping it in kind of modern rock production. So you can see bands like Highly Suspect, or there's this other band that I actually love, but I'm blanking on the name right now. Go figure again. But is new grunge revival. So we're kind of existing in those waters to bring it to the future, but to keep kind of an eye lens glass, or like kind of 1 foot in grunge, and to kind of hit home. And actually the lyrics in this song literally there's two sides to every story. We didn't know anything about the game when we wrote it. They just wanted us to write a nostalgic rock song, like a grunge song. They didn't tell us until we were well into writing it. And so there was like this, and they said that, nostalgia and specifically this word saudade, which is the pain of remembering. And so we kind of incorporated these, and they're like, oh yeah, so it's like, what do we need to think about? It's like, there are two sides of the story. There's the side from like, I'm looking into the future about what my life could be, and then there's me in the future looking back at my life and what has happened. And then, there are two sides to that experience. It just takes 20 years to do it. So then it coincidentally reflected the literal gameplay of the song, which was a little on the nose, but also worked really well for the game. It's, the end song, the old one was a little tongue-in-cheek, so why not be a little tongue-in-cheek for this one? And it was fun. It worked out
without
well.
the slap bass, which is the pain of remembering for you.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. No one wants to remember the slap bass. Every time you do, and your Casio keyboard, everyone hurts a little bit inside.
Oh man.
What's interesting about the slap bass is that it's a short duration sound, so it was one of the few things you could actually sample, in 1990s, given the state of the art. So that's probably why that sound became so. You think of Seinfeld and the unnatural longevity of slap bass in our culture. It's just probably because it's easy to sample based on antiquated technology.
I love that. The unnatural longevity of slap bass. That could be an entire GDC talk or something. That's actually a really good one. Someone should do that. That would be a really cool talk.
Oh man, I'm not going to do that talk. Although, weren't you actually just talking a few weeks back during NAMM? Actually,
I talk all the time, nonstop.
Yeah, but I think you actually had like an actual talk that you did though.
Yeah. I mean, part of what I try and do when I don't, in between gigs, or when I have an opportunity, is to kind of go out and talk to people and go to panels and try and educate and do my thing to give back when I have time to give back. So yes, I was at NAMM, specifically at NAMM, which is a whole event in itself. Most musicians know of it, but if like just game people are tuning in, or game audio fans, NAMM is an event that is. It is the National Association of Music Merchants, and it used to be a place where all of these like music stores and technology developers and instrument creators would all meet and like learn about new technologies, because what is the internet? And then at that event, they would kind of make deals for distribution and all sorts of fun things. Now it's just like, please endorse me. There's like a mile of music technology and instruments, and it used to be a way to develop or present new technologies. But again, now what is the internet? And that all happens like the week before. It's like what Black Friday used to be. So now all of November is a sale. So like all of January is like new events. I digress. There's a lot of opportunity at NAMM now for presenting about new technologies and conferences and all sorts of fun stuff. So during NAMM, there's an event called A3E, which is hosted by Doug DeAngelis. He's a music technologist and does a lot of awesome stuff. He's based out of Nashville, so he hosts an A3E event at NAMM. He hosts one in Moscow and one in Tennessee and Nashville. He hosts them all over the place, and it's specifically about kind of progressive technologies when it comes to music specifically, and sound design a little bit, and audio. And, excuse me. And so the panel specifically we were talking about was talking about 5G audio, or no, 5G in relationship to mobiles and how that affects audio and kind of the future of mobile game audio and mobile game music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mobile audio is kind of crazy. I mean, I guess that's been my space for the last few years. And it's neat how, just how powerful it is and just how much you can do with it. But it's also such a compromise with everything else that's going on. Yes, 5G is going to be one of those things that enables mobile audio to be more of a factor. But, that's still just one factor out of things like what is my initial build size when I actually put something onto the Apple Store or things like that. Where will the CPUs be for when I want to do something that's really rich with audio as opposed to just, I've got a lot of audio assets that I want to put out there. So yeah. Well, what sort of stuff are you seeing as being, this is what's going to be cool in mobile game audio, and what are you looking forward to?
We part of my presentation was specifically talking to mostly students and people who were looking to get into mobile games and kind of looking into the futures of that. So I talked a lot about kind of CPU and hardware considerations and things you have just mentioned for games. But then we spent a lot of time talking about what does 5G look like? And we're looking at technologies like Stadia, and it's like, that's just like a mobile gaming device without a phone in it. And like, where do those things eventually cross? And like, where does that balance come from? And how do companies differentiate themselves? And what does that mean for audio when you can if you can stream like CPU from the cloud? Like, it's not literal, but being able to handle processing off the device itself, then what is capable with music, and how does like that streaming environment introduce latency, and what sort of technologies are we going to have to incorporate to accommodate for that? And just trying to think about how else this is going to change the game. Because every time you move to a new console, even now when you're porting to a different a console or device, you have to be changing settings and optimizing your conversions and all sorts of things for each different device. But what does that mean for purely streaming or mobile devices as themselves? They've grown immensely powerful, but that next step is could potentially be intense.
Yeah, there's definitely some excitement there, but also some trepidation. I mean, you mentioned Stadia, and also Stadia is kind of weird. It's kind of crazy how little we're hearing about Stadia, considering it just launched, and that definitely gives me a little bit of pause as well. But yeah, I'm excited about the possibility of that, because I don't have to worry about the fact that my Android device is slightly different from this other person's Android device, which is also super powerful, but Yeah,
a big part of it too was thinking about like the considerations for mobile, right? Where it's like a PS4, and this is the analogy I made. It's like PS4, and my PS4 is the same as your PS4, which is the same as Mike's PS4, which is the same as Chase's PS4. But there is a very high chance all four of us have completely different mobile phones. But yet we all might want to play KOTOR at the same time, or we all might want to play like the same game, or maybe like a multiplayer game or something where we can connect to each other and experience it. And how do you optimize that for every single iteration of every single mobile device? Because the field is so wide and so diverse, there's a lot of potential for hiccups and confusion, and navigating that is a bit more difficult than just knowing hard and fast, like this is what we're working with all PlayStations, and then you're golden. Someone had a monopoly on phones other than Apple, then things would be different, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
For now.
Now.
Has anyone spent quality time with Stadia?
I have a little bit. Let's see. I played some of the beta of Assassin's Creed actually just before Stadia was released, and I was actually really impressed with it. I think that Assassin's Creed actually works pretty well for it because it is an action game, but it doesn't really require that sort of twitchiness that some games require. And they really did a good job, I think, of making Assassin's Creed just work really well on my web browser. I thought it was really cool. But I actually don't own a Stadia myself, so I don't know what's the latest on how the Stadia experience is.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about Stadia is like someone's doing it. There has to be a guinea pig who just like jumps into the marketplace and takes a beating and figures it out for everyone else. Normally it's like Apple or Microsoft or someone else who jumps in there and wants to kind of create a new market, like a blue ocean event. And I think it's a little rough right now, and I think 5G will help, and kind of newer streaming options and higher, 5G or net or anything like that will kind of help progress this technology into new territories and solve a lot of these problems. Specifically, like you're saying, games are so Twitch based, and kind of there's that blink factor where you have to constantly be playing within milliseconds of what's happening in the game, or else you lose. And I think Stadia has not cracked that, but from what I have seen and read, I haven't personally played one.
Yeah. Wait, the tech of
Stadia is the second. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, go for it, Chase.
Stadia is the second guinea pig.
Oh yeah.
PlayStation was doing this with Gaikai.
There was Gaikai
streaming.
There was also On Live. Remember that one?
On Live. Yep. Yeah. So those are the two. Stadia is the one that's just going out there swinging hard.
Yeah, sure.
It got the attention of at least Xbox, because Xbox sees them as the competitors now and not Sony and Nintendo. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
Google has always been willing to do expensive proof of concepts for the benefit of everyone watching.
Right.
You think of Google Glass as another example of this technology that seems really cool and seems a little ahead of its time. And it's nice that they did that to explore the space a little bit and maybe machete a path for future iterations of the same technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all this talk of tech, I'm thinking back actually to all the cool stuff that we saw at NAMM. Besides, I hope that you were able to check out the stuff there as opposed to, and not just sort of, let's see. I mean, whenever I think about giving a talk, I always worry that, am I just going to be stuck doing this and not actually enjoying all the stuff that's out there? Because there's just a big field of new crazy stuff that people are going to be putting out there.
There's so much stuff, and I did walk the floor, and so I was there for a day, a night, and then a morning.
Okay.
So I had the panel, and that same night I hosted a Game Audio Network Guild meetup that our good friend Chase went to, and our mutual friend Kyle Johnson went to, who is not my brother, Kyle Johnson, but I do have a brother, Johnson. I always have to make this. I have to say this out loud every time I talk about Kyle Johnson. Anyways. And that was great. It was super fun. But between those two commitments and then a couple of meetings, and because our kind of audio, sound, and music company collaborates with a lot of music technology companies, so I kind of buzzed around a little bit and met with a couple of people. Then Game Audio Network Guild meetup, and then the next morning I walked the floor a bit, and it's just, it's loud, man. Stay away from the drums and bring earplugs. Those are my two rules. But
free earplugs at NAMM. Shout out to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I went there to go get those free earplugs, and the line was like the length of Hall D. So I just didn't bother. I did not.
There was a line. You just got in the wrong line. There was two different sides. You just go up to the other side and you pick it up if you already had.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not playing this game right now. As for like new stuff, I'm trying to think. So the Luna audio, the DAW was cool, I guess. The new 2600 from Korg was cool. I'm looking at a quick list. remembered. Like, I lost my mind when that was announced. But then Behringer, like a day later, was like, "Actually, we're gonna release one too, and it'll probably only be $600." And I was like, "I'll take 7 of them."
Oh man.
But honestly, other than that, no, I didn't really. I mean, I'm sure there was a ton of things, but I'm trying to think. Those were the two that really took my attention and thought, made me think, man, I actually kind of want one of those. I think Luna's cool, not for like creating, because it's nearly functionless right now for sound designers or people who are doing kind of tech heavy stuff, though they have MI and VI and things like that inside of it. But the way the signal path is optimized and kind of digitally recreates summing mixers and all this stuff would be great for like stemming out a soundtrack and building it in there. So I'm looking forward to doing that, or doing like a music editing session for a film or something to print down stems again, or doing something like that. And then again, the ARP 2600 is just the synth after my heart. So yeah, what about you, Chase? What did you see there?
Symphonic Planet. Oh, here we go with this whole like.
Oh no,
it's under NDA. I can't tell about it. Anyways, so I'll just read it off. If you go actually to Symphonic Planet, I think .com, they made a freaking contact instrument out of sand, and it sounds so cool. I mean, how the hell do you? I know that computers and chips and stuff, but this doesn't sound like what you're thinking it's going to sound like. It's not like Aladdin sand time thing or any of that. This sounds pretty damn awesome with textures. I mean, I think the people in Osaka who were stretching your stuff out, Cody, would gloat over this. And they had a contact instrument where they recorded this old dystopian type of truck. It's definitely abandoned. And me being really heavy with rhythms, I love this so much. It is so deep and resonant and powerful. I feel like you would never need a bass drum or a taiko or anything, or grand casa or any of those things ever again for your orchestral pieces. Just sneak that one in there, and I think you're okay. So shout out to Symphonic Planet for that. And Q Up Arts actually met up with the guy. They were right next to each other. It was like, I didn't know who was with Symphonic Planet, but then I saw Q Up Arts, and they are doing some cool new things. They're a very legacy sample library company. If you're not familiar, they were doing some of the stuff, I'm thinking, in the early 2000s with really eclectic and other world type instruments from like Europe and things of that nature. So they've got some new stuff on the horizon. And some game audio people who are getting into that stuff now should definitely be checking it out.
Awesome. Very cool.
Mike, did you get a chance to go to NAMM this year?
I did not. I have to rely on vicarious reports from my colleagues like yourself. How about you?
I was there for a day. I got to check out some cool stuff. Let's see. There was definitely a part of me that really wanted to buy a Korg Wave State. I really liked it. I mean, it was just so fun twiddling and being like, oh, I want this as a patch. Whatever I just did, I want this as a patch. Okay. I'm just twiddling and fiddling and making some cool sounds with it. And that was actually really fun to mess with. I mean, I kind of have a fondness for a lot of Korg stuff, for a long time, living in the 90s and 2000s, the M1, Wave Station. So I was like, okay, I've got to check out this Wave State. I thought, this is fun. This is fun to play with. So that was probably my favorite sort of hands-on experience. And I did see all the sort of fun synth stuff that was going on too. And I'm like, okay, that was cool. Hung out with some people. I ran into the dudes over at Impact Soundworks, and we talked some of the stuff that they're talking about, some of their cool, they're redoing some of their instruments, because I've actually been using their instruments for a few years now, especially some of their ethnic winds. And they're going to be redoing some of those ethnic winds with this new UI, which is actually really cool. I've always liked the sounds of things like their shakuhachi and all that stuff. They're just really good sounds, but they're not absolutely perfectly playable for the way that I want to do stuff with my keyboard and my iPad or with my iWis, which you could see over here.
See those? Those are just dropped casually behind you. You're like, check out my iWis.
Iwi collection.
I mean, I use my iWis all the time. You know, if I'm writing an orchestral piece, iWi is going to figure in there 90% of the time. If it's not a keyed instrument, I record it with an iWi. So, bam.
Wow.
But yeah, doing stuff with iWis, for example, with Impact Soundworks stuff, it's like not quite right, you know, just because of the quality of MIDI input that I give it. But it sounds like they're doing some stuff with their UI for their new wins, and they're going to be going back to the old ones as well and doing the refurbishment of those older instruments. So that's actually really cool too. Yeah.
Not only that, they've got the Shreddish 3 Hydra that is pretty good, I have to say. I can't say much, but
me out of business, Chase. That's what you're doing.
Hey, look, I'm having fun and tampering.
You see that thing over there?
You got your
It
thing?
has more strings than you have fingers. Like, come on.
Yeah, well, that sample library definitely beat that one.
Oh man.
You know, what's interesting is that like the game industry as a whole and electronic music are approximately the same age. And touching back into what we were talking about earlier with the revisitation of Resident Evil 2, you know, both industries are now turning their eyes backwards and trying to self-curate and bring back the fondest things from the past and give them a new life in the future. Absolutely. So there are these interesting parallels. And I wonder if anyone's ever scored like a reboot of a game, all with reboots of virtual instruments to have a, you know, complete nostalgia parallel.
I think it just happened. Tom Salta and Martin Stig Anderson scored Wolfenstein Youngbloods. With only hardware that existed in the 80s. I mean, again, that the Wolfenstein games itself came out in the 90s, and I think they're, correct me if I'm wrong, and then the 90s or maybe the early 2000s or something. But this game was based in the 80s. So that's the closest equivalent that I know of, where it was hardware only. I think, of course, they recorded it into a computer, but not quite as like, you know, parallel one-to-one tracking. But you're right. How many Model D like monophonic synths have been made in the last 2 years alone? I feel like there's a new one that comes out every other week. I'm pretty sure the new Dave Instruments synth that was just announced is exactly that. It's just like a Model D, but with a bit more zhuzh, and then you have Behringer, and you have Core did one too with the Minilog and all these other things. But it's, and everything does that too. I think music right now went through that 80s phase. Now it's cool to be in the 90s again, and then next year it'll be 2000s, and then come 2025 we'll be like 60s are back in. It's like
Complete loop. Well, every now and then, you know, as each generation has a set of memories and then they come into contact with disposable income, the market turns to them and says, hey, remember all this stuff from when you were a teenager? Now you can buy it.
That's a good point. That's interesting. It's like me rebuying all the Kingdom Hearts games before 3 came out. It's like they conveniently uppriced all of them back to $60. I was like, damn.
They're getting my money. They gotcha.
You know, they sure did. And I don't know if it's worth it, but no, it was worth
it. Man, let's talk about games, actually. Like, yeah, I mean, when did you first... What were your first and fondest memories as a video gamer? Because you've been playing games for a while, right?
Oh yeah, probably too much for too long. I played a little bit of Warcraft 3 Reforged this morning. Again, it's all about those early memories and then reboot games. I'm digging that. But no, the first thing I played, and I know this is the first thing, not just the first thing I remember, but was a game on Sega Genesis called VectorMan.
Well, that was a good game.
I love the shit out of that game. I played that with my dad. That was one of my very first experiences to kind of not have like a father-son moment, but to like have him come home from a yard sale, because it was a little bit after Sega Genesis release, maybe a couple of years. And so he like brought it home from a yard sale. He was like, check out what I got. We got Sonic the Hedgehog and we got VectorMan. He didn't know anything about games, but he was like, we're going to play this. And so I played VectorMan and Sonic with him. And then like I had this visceral experience of my brother playing Sonic too much, and I wanted to play, and I pulled the cartridge out, and that like fried the game. And then, oh yeah, that was bad. Real bad. Anyways, so I played VectorMan a ton with my dad, and that was an amazing experience. at like an early age, my first experience with games was like a social experience. So I kind of had that engraved in my mind moving forward, where I played a lot of BattleNet or moving to World of Warcraft or just all sorts of kind of online-based games. Played a lot of Blizzard games. Played a lot of narrative games, which was like a fun way for me to kind of escape when I was bullied, or, you know, that's very cliche, but of course I feel like we all share a very similar experience at some point. Kind of going to a new world, specifically Azeroth was my place to go, or anything like that. So it's always been kind of an integral part. And then there's like so much social and community, and you learn a lot of soft skills playing with other people online. Again, I'm going to talk about World of Warcraft, but playing with like 24 other people and helping someone else lead a raid and coordinating and having to know everyone else's role a little bit better than you know your role for like this greater good, and being this twitch reflex and working on the fly and working under pressure. I think that above all things has like helped me professionally, not only deal with people and work on a team, but like work under pressure and being able to cope in those environments.
Oh man, too true.
What about you, Vince? You're a gamer, man? You like to play video games?
I like to play games. Honestly, you were talking about Sega Genesis, and then I realized, yeah, I mean, we're kind of the same era, and then I realized I'm not sure about that. I mean, my first games were like Commodore 64, and I was, and it's so funny. I was actually just thinking back to it because my first real game memories were totally without any audio. And I think that's part of why I was so interested in audio, because my cousin had a Commodore 64 and one of those black and green monitors, but there was no sound output on it. So I was playing all of these classic games that many people actually remember for their music, because the Commodore 64 was one of those first platforms where people were like, oh, wow, the SID chip on the Commodore 64 is powerful. But I actually didn't experience that for a good solid 2-3 years. I thought video games, how come they didn't have music or sound? And so I imagined all that audio in my head. And I think that was part of my part of what pushed me to think about making game audio a career. And then eventually I got an Atari 7800, and I realized, oh, video games do have music. Gotcha. And then an NES and all that stuff.
Oh, wow. You played them all, man.
How did the experience of, this is like those stories where someone's sight is restored through surgery and then suddenly they've got this whole, how did the experience of game music compare to what you'd imagined?
Well, it's not like I totally thought that games didn't have music. It's just that, I had to go to an arcade to experience the full game experience. And I loved going to arcades. And that was great. But of course, arcades were, kind of loud and messy. And
expensive.
And expensive. A quarter was important back then. It was like, man, I only have so many of these. I can't just throw them down willy-nilly. But it was, really fun. A lot of my favorite games were actually very realistic. Well, realistic games. So things like Epic's Karate, for example. It's like, it's not like Street Fighter 2 and throwing fireballs everywhere. You have to do like a complicated motion in order to do something like a kick. And so I can imagine, bams, like stuff like that. And then when I got the Atari 7800, the Atari 7800 was actually a pretty powerful machine, but it had kind of crappy sound. It really wasn't good. And it wasn't until like the NES where, oh, wow, I can actually listen to this music for a while. I can hang out on Super Mario Brothers and the music's just going to keep on going. There's a full song here. Cool. I like this. So, the NES was really sort of a thing that opened me up even further to, wow, music, and not just sound as like just a straightforward feedback for what I was doing in the game.
Right. That's very cool. It's like that experience where it's you playing the game without any audio reminded me of like when you're kids and you want to play like Star Wars and you have sticks and you're making your own lightsaber sound. I could see you like playing and like pew, 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 like making your own sound effects with your voice. And I think that probably eventually led you on a similar path to where you're at now, where it's like I feel like you might still do that.
Oh God, yeah. It's so true. And sometimes I'll be looking at games and imagining the sound effect for what's going on, and then there will be this sort of like a disconnect, this this dissonance, because I'm imagining the sound, but then I'm listening to the actual sound that's coming through the speaker. So it's like, that's not what I expected, but oh, okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Wow. What are you, I know you were talking about Warcraft Reforged, so that's kind of a new hot thing right now. Of course, new old hot thing. Anything else on the horizon for you that you're anticipating?
Oh, there's always things coming out. I have this bad hobby of collecting games because I don't have time to play them as much as I want. Chase is laughing.
Yeah, you got jokes there.
Oh yeah, that's funny. I'm glad you caught that. But no, seriously, like I buy games faster than I can play them. But so I've got a back catalog of some amazing games that I'm looking forward to play. I'm like halfway through Death Stranding because that's still a new game in my mind. But and that's masterful in its own right. I'm looking forward to Doom, of course. I think there's big ones that everyone's looking forward to. I don't know what sort of indie games or smaller games are kind of on the slate coming out for this year, but I'm always pleasantly surprised when I play any of the games that kind of get into the awards circuits that you didn't hear about, and you're like, how do I get into a culture to find out and hear about these? Like, so I always look forward to that experience, but nothing too big other than those couple of games. I think The Last of Us 2 as well. But if you have any recommendations for good ones coming out this year, I'm always open to add, take away a little bit of space on my bookshelf and then play it in 3 years. So,
Well, what about besides the games? Do you do the same thing when it comes to musical instruments, whether it be software or hardware? Do you just collect them and not play them, which sounds actually really sad? But I assume you're playing your instruments, right?
Yeah, it's sad. I feel like we all have this. I think it harkens back specifically when it comes to software and plugins and instruments of this imposter syndrome that anyone who's a creative professional has. It's like, oh, if I buy this Celeste sound from Impact Soundworks, I will have the best ambient Celeste sounds that'll make my music as good as I am, and then you're like, no, this isn't what's going to make me better. And then it sits on your hard drive for 2 years until you're like, I should use that sample. But I used to.
Iris 2 came to mind.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's an amazing synth, but again, a very specific person doing a very specific task will use that synth. So I used to have some really bad imposter syndrome. I mean, naturally, I think we all still do, but I used to buy a lot more software than I used. And even now, I mean, I have several terabytes of things existing on my computer that just sit there. I'm like, I should just delete this, but I'm like, oh, there's that one session that I'll open in maybe 2 years that has that synth. So I try and avoid that. I'm pretty good about it now. I really don't buy things unless I truly, truly need them. I love guitars. You can't see it too well, but don't mind John Travolta's face. But I have a lot of guitars, and I still have a hobby of building them. So that's my way to do this collectionist, this male stereotype collectionist that's deep inside of me, that I just want all of the things and hang them on a wall. That's how I do that. Is I'll like build out guitars and kind of do my favorite version of all of the guitars that I love.
How are you recording your guitars? Are you going to be plugging into a real amp and recording, or are you just going straight into your interface? Or
well, this is a good topic for anyone who is looking to get into media music in general, where there's an aggressive revision process, where you can't just like throw up a 5150 and just do some power chords and then call it a day, because someone's gonna be like, actually, can you change the tempo, and then actually can you change the amp, and then do and there's like this perpetual re-recording process. So what I do, depending on the project, I currently don't have an out-of-box. I have an amp. I have a Carvin Legacy Steve Vai amp that I'll use sometimes. But for the most part, until I'm ready to finish, I'll just do kind of just a amp sim. I'll use Bias, or I've started to use the Dark Glass amps or Fortin. Those are great too. I'll use those ones. I really want an Axe-FX 3, but no one has $2,000 to blow on one of those.
What?
I'll run it through a preamp. I'll go through a DI box. I'm just kind of like looking around the room. It's like second nature to me at this point, but I realize that this is like important information, because if you have like high impedance, looks like Mike left. So long, Sir Mike. We'll miss you. His time has come. But if you have a high impedance output, you can't put it into a normal preamp because that'll degrade the sound quality, and then it won't drive your virtual amp the same way a high gain and potentially clipping guitar would clip your pedals, which would clip your amp. Clipping is good sometimes. I know your teachers told you that's false, but clip things for fun and test it out. So it's like this delicate process of understanding how to get good tone. So I'll run a pretty hot signal through a DI box, through a preamp, through a high Z input on a preamp, back into my computer. Sometimes later on in the process, once I get it approved, I'll take that DI signal and I'll re-record it through a Kemper or an Axe-FX, or I'll go to a studio, depending on what the project is. That's what we did with a lot of the guitars on Resident Evil, and we recorded some new ones, and then on Devil May Cry, we just completely re-recorded everything in the studio with a band called Suicide Silence, where they have really nice, and they dial in their tone. They have like marks on their amps for what they sound like, so that was an easy project. We used like 8 mics, I think, like 3 close mics, a room mic, and 2 back mics. Super big tone. So if you listen to that, you can just kind of imagine that multi-mic setup. That's cool. So it's a complicated process, but I feel like anyone who is a musician and kind of has their one thing that they do, they really hone in and master how to put that aspect into their music and get some liveliness and kind of an organic feel into it. Whether you're a rapper or a woodwinds player or anything like that. Jeez.
I think that's really, I think that's really true. Like you got that thing that you do, and then you know exactly what to do with it and how to add on to it and work with it in different ways. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, man, I know this is the Game Audio Hour, but we started late, and I know that time is kind of always of the essence when you're working in music. So we should probably start wrapping it up pretty soon. I'm sorry we had to see Mike go there. I'm wondering, any last thoughts? Actually, Chase, any last thoughts from you, or last questions? Or
Yeah, so I guess what I was going to ask is, how do you like working in the game industry currently as of now, and what other things do you want to bring into the community now that you have a positive presence?
Yeah. And this is something we've actually talked about a lot, right? I think we were on the phone before the new year for like an hour and a half almost talking about this topic. First of all, the game dev community is awesome. I can't express that enough, because I've come from a couple of different communities. I've had like this little, kind of frog hopping trajectory since I have moved to Los Angeles. I originally was going to be a singer-songwriter. Then I moved to like just producing songs and writing and working in the studio. Realized that the egos and the personalities were too much, and then also there's a lot of shadiness, and wanted to just write music, be creative. So I'm kind of got introduced to scoring and got into film and TV, worked in film and TV for a while. Yeah. And like that crunch is a whole different kind of crunch than video game crunch, where like that crunch is just always happening nonstop.
Sure.
And then again, a lot of personalities, a lot of egos, a lot of people pushing you around, not a ton of creative freedom, and everyone's a film fan too. So I think the audience is much more broad and very judgmental at times. But again, very creative freeing, but you're also restricted to the content in a very linear fashion. So when I had the opportunity to do a game, I was like, whoa, I completely forgot that this could even be a career, because nothing has ever presented itself to me. But I've been playing games forever. So I was like, okay, let's give this a shot. Let's jump into this world and see what it's like. And that was, we did a couple of small game things before Marvel vs. Capcom, but that was my first kind of jump into the world and understanding interactivity and getting my feet wet a little bit. And I'm like, whoa, what is this game audio thing, and who are these people that make these masterful games, and how do I get better and learn more? I went to Game SoundCon, and I was just like really intimidated and blown away by how intelligent and wise people were. That wasn't a pun. I'm sorry. And
They appreciate it. Don't worry.
yeah, you're welcome. And just there was so much more to learn. And after I started learning and diving in and kind of gained the confidence and validation to feel like I could join the community, which was wrong in itself. I should have just joined it. And I tell everyone who I talk to and mentor just to go out there and start talking to people. Go to GDC, go to GSC, go to PAX or MAG or anywhere else, and just walk up to people and start talking to them, because they're going to be nice to you. They're going to be encouraging. And that doesn't happen in any of the other, adjacent, tangential music industries, whether it's film or TV or just straight up music industry or anything like that, music technology. Game audio, more than anything, is very loving and embracing and amazing experience. And then I just decided, like, straight up, wow, I'm just going to do this now. Like, I'm not going to bother doing work that just brings me, the unhealthy kind of stress and brings me under duress, and I get burnt out and unhappy. Right. Now it's just, I love everyone I work with. I love talking to you guys about this. This is fun. I was telling them earlier that, I worked over the weekend, so this is my time to just have fun, and then I'm going to take a nap. But, and this is like what I want to do in my free time, is I want to talk to you guys. You have a platform to help people and to guide people and to talk about this topic. And so this is something that I have started realizing, that this is part of having, mild success and having opportunity and a platform. Because now, and fortunately, it took relative success for people to like point to me and be like, oh, like that's a guy. And I'm like, yes, but now what do I do with that opportunity? And I realized that most people will capitalize on that and use it opportunistically and kind of have this egoist self-gaining moment. And I was like, no. I'm going to flip this, and I'm going to use it to help other people. So I've gone out of my way in a similar fashion to people mentored me and brought me up, that I just want to do that. And I want to give back to a community that has given me so much and is giving away so much to anyone interested in jumping into it or starting in it. All in all, it's been extremely refreshing and revitalizing, and I just feel good about myself now, unlike I did for the last 8 years, which is like a horrible thing to say, but it only took 8 years. Most people go their whole lives without being happy, but
that's true.
It got really dark really fast, but all in all, game audio is awesome. I love it, and I'm trying to do some things. I'm trying to, where things are in movement in the shadows, and hopefully we can announce some things soon that will help up and coming people or people already in the industry kind of optimize what tools they have for their own success.
Excellent.
That's
excellent. It's great to have you in the community too, so thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. I love this, man. It's best.
Thank you. Well, this was great. You're great. Maybe in a future show we'll have you on again, and you could also talk about some of the things that you alluded to, if you want to announce some things that are coming in the future. But
absolutely,
yeah. But for now, I guess we have to call this a show. This was episode 181 of the Game Audio Hour, and thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Yes.
Check us out on Twitter. You could like us, Game Audio Hour, on Twitter. We're also on Facebook, Game Audio Hour. You're on Twitter as well, right, Cody?
That's true. I'm at Cody Matthew J, because there's not enough characters to do my full name. And then on Instagram, it's at Cody Matthew Johnson. Don't do Cody Johnson, because there's a country star named Cody Johnson. And he used to destroy my SEO, but after I hired Sabrina at Defiant PR, she's great. If you ever have a game coming out, call them, and they'll work with you to help optimize that release. And so my SEO is now, I'm head-to-head with this guy, and it's great.
Nice.
It's ideal.
Excellent. Yeah. So thank you, and that's a wrap. We'll see you guys for the next Game Audio Hour later this month. Bye.
Awesome. Take care.
Bye. I'm playing Dracula.